Finance Minister Mthuli faces a daunting task as he prepares to present the 2025 national budget in Zimbabwe. In a pre-budget meeting held in Bulawayo, various stakeholders, including members of parliament and ministers, emphasized the need for allocations in key sectors such as health, education, climate change, agriculture, and social safety nets.
Finance Minister Mthuli must ensure there's something for everyone, if the pre-budget meetings held in the past days are anything to go by. In his pre-budget consultative workshop, he highlighted areas of priority. On the list is the improvement of healthcare infrastructure and services to be financed through sin taxes, with 24 million United States dollars already having been collected and awaiting disbursement to the Health Ministry for the procurement of, among other things, cancer machines and drugs.
We have introduced this sugar content tax to really try to attack the scourge of cancer. I noticed that in the latest numbers, we have 24 million US dollars that we have raised so far from the sugar content tax, and the Minister of Health is finalizing the procurement processes for cancer machines and medicines.
The minister also responded to proposals for the development of educational infrastructure, allocation of more resources to the sector, and accessibility to ensure quality education for all Zimbabweans, particularly those in previously marginalized communities.
So we are more than meeting, Mr. Speaker, the Dakar target in terms of allocation in the education sector. The issue may be how we spend it. It's building classrooms, hiring teachers, learner support, ICT infrastructure. The budget will seek to do all of these, Mr. Speaker.
Agriculture Minister Dr. Anxious Masuga called for agricultural development support, irrigation schemes, and farmer empowerment programs to boost food security.
It is agriculture with its linkages to manufacturing, to mining, that will accelerate economic development, which is why each year with a drought, we see economic stagnation. So we must de-link growth from drought, which is climate proofing, and I am pleased that so many members raised this aspect.
Minister Ncube acknowledged the challenges and pledged to prioritize those critical areas. However, he said balancing competing demands with limited resources will require careful consideration.
As representatives of the citizens, we take your recommendations and comments seriously, and we commit to incorporate them into the budget as much as possible. I thank you, Kalumba, Tinotenda, Siabonga.
Speaker of Parliament, Advocate Jacob Mdenda, called for the prioritization of constituency development funds.
Sacrosanct responsibility, because we are dealing with the lives of the people. The lives of the people who must be improved by the nature and quality of the budget that we must craft.
Professor Ncube said only 27 constituencies had submitted proposals and encouraged more parliamentarians to send submissions for constituency development funds.
With the recommendations, with the findings, that we have to do better on CDF releases, on paying MP allowances, and in supporting their welfare, be it the timely provisions of coupons. I can assure you, going forward, we're committed to make sure that we deliver our own time on Parliament's budget.
As Zimbabwe moves forward, the 2025 budget will play a crucial role in shaping the country's development trajectory. For ZTN Prime, I'm Andile Chuma in Bulawayo.
We are now joined by Eben Mabunda to discuss some of the policy frameworks under consideration. Eben, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, what are the chances that the minister will go big on Syntax to fund the health sector?
Good evening. Well, of course, health is a critical aspect of the Zimbabwean economy, which would need sufficient funding. Several of our medical institutions across the country are in need of some basic elements, and as far as equipment and as far as medication. And so on an annual basis, there have been expectations that perhaps from the Treasury side, there would be some degree of interventions of some sort. But the big question is, where does Treasury fund that from? The idea of syntax, it's not clear at this point where and how Treasury will inject funding into the health system, and what sort of systems that will be put in place. So at this point, it would be too early whether there would be a funding from syntax or how big the minister will go in as far as syntax is concerned. But it must be emphasized that there is need for adequate financing and adequate funding to take care of the country's health needs.
So now, Eben, how important then is it for Professor Ncube to prioritize agriculture for food security?
Now, owing to the El Nino-induced drought, over 6 million people in Zimbabwe are said to be food insecure, and that has affected the growth of the Zimbabwean economy. Why? Because this is an agro-based economy. There are over 1.5 million small-scale farmers that are spread across the length and the breadth of this economy, and millions of families have their livelihoods dependent on the country's agricultural sector. So it goes without saying that there will be a prioritization towards the country's agriculture. But then the big question then becomes again how this agricultural sector is going to be funded. Are we going to see command agriculture? What sort of schemes are we going to see? Are we going to see the presidential input scheme at play again at this particular point? So all of these are questions that the minister will need to be answering. All these are elements that need to be attended to, and there is a big question mark as to how to fund the country's agricultural sector. And also to add on to its importance, this is a sector that is responsible for at least 40% of the inputs into the country's manufacturing or industrial sector, as it were. So it will be important to see how the minister navigates this one.
Now, even how important is it also for the minister to come up with tax incentives to lure more people in the informal sector?
Well, I guess incentives would be the key word here in terms of how to lure the informal sector of the economy. Why do I say that? Because if the tax measures and the tax regimes are too punitive, as we saw in the pronouncement of the 2024 budget, that will go very little in getting them captured in the various tax brackets that would exist. So it may be necessary for Treasury to try and meet the private sector halfway and come up with measures that would strike a win-win for both the private sector as well as Treasury. But from my perspective, what would be important is not necessarily a strategy that seeks to milk immediately, but maybe a strategy that seeks to grow that informal sector and meet them halfway and look at harnessing or gleaning from the private sector in the medium term, maybe a 3-year horizon, and not necessarily a means or a strategy of trying to milk from the informal sector in the 2025 fiscal. I think that may be tricky, given that we're coming from an El Nino-induced drought and the economy still needs to recover. So I think we need about a 2 to 3 year horizon before we can look at milking from the informal sector of the economy.
Konapo ipapo ba ZTN Prime, DSTV channel 294, the place to be.